Good morning. Welcome to a special edition of California Unearthed. I am doing a profile today on an historical individual that is related to my friend Cheryl, who's actually behind the camera right now. We'll hear from her a little bit later. But I need to do a little bit of background on this before I get started on the story. I am working on my genealogy for my family tree and my family history, and I'm using ancestry.com and a few other resources to do that. And I kind of hit a little bit of a hiccup. So Cheryl wanted me to do her side. So I went and started doing her side and working on her family history. And I came upon an individual, a great uncle of hers, her grandfather's brother, who she did not know ever existed. And I'll explain why here in a little bit. But so what I found out was a very interesting story that has to do with this lake, this waterway, and Whiskeytown. This happened in 1926, and the lake didn't exist back in 1926. The waterway that you're looking at behind me is actually Clear Creek. Obviously it didn't look like this in 1926, but it looks like this now that we have Whiskeytown Lake. So to move on with our story, let's get started with it. So to start this story, we need to figure out who the cast of characters are. First off, we have Cheryl's great uncle. His name is Henry Saffell, Henry Joseph Saffell actually. And his wife is Edith McKay Saffell, and her mother is Nellie Smith McKay. Now, Edith was married before to Harry Vaughn, and that name will come in, or at least the last name will come into play here a little bit later. But with her marriage from Harry, she had 3 children. Unfortunately, one of them, Frank, passed away when he was born in 1922, but she had 2 other children that lived with her and Henry Saffell. And that was Lorena Vaughn and Edward Vaughn. Now, Edith and Henry Saffell had a child of their own, Clarice. So there's 3 children in the household. So now that we have the cast of characters, let's move on to the story. Story begins in January 20th of 1926, and it happens here in Whiskeytown, close to Oak Bottom. And it's about, according to the records, 2 miles south of the Tower House, close to Oak Bottom, and that's about where we're standing right now. I don't know the exact location of this incident, but it's about where we're at, or it's pretty close. It happened on the border of what they call Tucker Ranch, and Edith was at the creek, at this creek here actually, Clear Creek, mining and panning for gold with either her father or some other gentleman. It's not clear on who she was panning with. And the important thing to know about this is her and Henry Saffell were separated at the time, and they'd been separated about a month. And so what happened was, on January 20th, Henry Saffell brought the stagecoach from Reading into Oak Bottom being a stage stop, and also the Tower House just 2 miles down the road was also a stage stop. So, and yes, the stage did still run in 1926, surprisingly. I was actually surprised to see that fact myself. But he brought the stage here to Oak Bottom, and he was witnessed by the older daughter, Lorena, hiding in the bushes around 10 o'clock. And what Lorena did was went and told her grandmother, Nellie, that she had just saw Henry hiding in the bushes with a gun. So the grandmother packed up the 3 kids, and she ran off to tell Edith what was going on. So they hung around Clear Creek up until about 1 o'clock, and they started heading back to the house on the road to the home. And on the way, she heard a gunshot, and they were wondering what that was. Next thing you know, there's a second shot that hit them right in front of them, kicked up the dirt. And the third shot hit Nellie McKay, the grandmother, and unfortunately it took out both of her legs, shattered both of her legs above the kneecaps. And a fourth shot rang out. And what Henry actually did is he ran a little bit closer to where he was hiding and shot a fourth time, which hit Edith in the abdomen. And then a fifth shot rang out, and that shot he was aiming for Lorena, the daughter, or his stepdaughter. Fortunately, he missed that shot. But then he walked up to the group of them and said that, if I can remember correctly, the quote was, "I told you if I'm going to leave this world, I'm taking you with me." And then he was going to bash their heads in with the butt of the gun that he had. Fortunately, Miss McKay talked him out of that, and for some reason he had a moment of clarity and realized what he had done, and handed the gun over to Edith, his wife, and said, "I have killed you, now kill me." And which she did not do. She actually put the gun under herself and laid on it. And what Henry ended up doing was said, "I'll go get help if you don't tell him that I did this." And they agreed to it. So he walked down to Oak Bottom and called for help. And so what happened is the sheriff then came out and got Edith and Nellie to the Shasta General Hospital, which we will go to here in a little bit, and I'll show you what that looks like. But like I said, it was basically a crime of passion. He was jealous because they were separated, and Edith may have been with another man. So the two photographs I just showed, the first was that of Henry Saffell. That was his prison photo from San Quentin. And the second is a very crude photocopy of Nellie Smith McKay, the grandmother and mother. That's the only photograph I can find of her, unfortunately. So that's all I can work with right now. But after the shooting, Henry Saffell was captured in the town of Oak Bottom, which is now under the lake, and he was sent off to the city jail and then transferred to the county jail once Miss McKay passed away 2 days later, and he was charged with first-degree murder in her death. He was sentenced to life in prison and sent to San Quentin on February 19th, 1926, where he stayed up until his transfer to Folsom Prison in 1948. But in 1950, he was paroled from Folsom Prison and lived the rest of his life in Woodland, California, until his passing in 1969. And you probably want to know what happened with the children. Lorena, the 7-year-old at the time, she was shipped off to her Aunt Vaughn in the Bay Area, where she lived up until her adult years, and she moved back to the Redding area. And there's a kind of a weird story with that one. I'll let Cheryl explain that one. This is kind of odd. But the other two, Clarice and Edward, they were given to the Vaughn family as well, but they lived here in the Redding area and grew up here. And I know that Florice got married and moved to the Sacramento area and lived out the rest of her life there. As far as Lorena goes, I know Lorena lived a good long life. She lived to be into her 90s and just passed away here recently, a few years ago. So that's good to hear. Not the fact that she passed away, but that she grew to be in her 90s. So anyway, I'm going to flip the camera around and let Cheryl kind of explain her views and her thoughts on her family history and see what she has to say. And then we'll take a trip down to the old hospital and the cemetery and show you where Nellie and Edith were taken. So Cheryl, thank you for joining me on this. I'd really like to get your opinion and your thoughts on this issue. So what did you think when I brought up the fact that you had a great uncle?
Well, when you first asked me, I said, no, I have no uncle named Henry Saffell. Never heard of the guy. Thinking if I did, someone in the family would have said something. So I thought, no, you had it wrong. It was just another Henry Saffell from another family named Saffell. But no, I didn't think that he was related to me at all.
So you talked to some other family members and asked them about it. What'd they say?
I did. I actually was texting one of my second cousins. She was my mother's cousin, and asked her, and she did know of him. She says she does have some stories about him and that he was a very bad man. I haven't had the chance to go down to visit her yet and really kind of get into some of the stories that she has, so I'm interested to hear some of them and what it was all about.
So what has come of me finding him as far as family goes? I mean, is there other family members that you've gotten contact now with, or?
Yes, actually, with Robert doing my genealogy and finding out that Henry and Edith had a daughter, Florice, Robert's been able to contact me with, I believe it would be the grandson of Florice. And haven't talked to him. We've been in contact with his wife and spoke to her a little bit, and she's been very interested in the whole story. She's done some investigation on her part, but didn't get very far. So I do plan on taking a trip to meet with that side of the family and just get to know them and know that, I have another cousin out there. I think that's exciting, and it's great.
I know with me doing this research, we've kind of gone down some roads that we didn't expect. And one of those roads was the fact that, you have some more cousins and stuff like that. But there's this other road that's a really weird connection with your family. Can you kind of explain that weird connection I'm talking about?
Yes, this one blew my mind and actually blew Robert's mind too when he got going into it. But what we found out is that Edith's daughter from, I believe it was Harry Vaughn, that would have been Lorena. We found out that later in her life, she actually married my grandmother Ware's brother. Now that's on my father's side of the family. So it makes me question, and I just kind of wonder what Lorena would have felt if she had known that her husband's nephew was married to Henry's niece. I'm sure probably she would not have been very happy about that because I did hear that she wanted nothing to do with the Saffells after the fact and everything that had happened, and I can't blame her. But what a turn of events of having her marry someone that's not directly married to a Saffell, but his nephew had married my mother, who is a Saffell.
So just to get that a clarification is Henry Saffell is from your mother's side.
Correct.
And William Carr, who married Lorena, is from your father's side.
Correct.
And none of the Carr family is from Shasta County.
That is correct. They are not.
Okay, and your parents met in Napa.
Correct.
Talk about weird.
That is very weird.
All right, now there's another kind of odd situation, and that has to do with something I haven't researched a whole lot of, but I'm going to, and I will do a vlog on, and that is the Limestone Massacre in Hayfork. Can you shed some light on what I'm talking about?
Yes, there was a massacre up in the Hayfork area. I can't remember the dates, but it was basically a massacre of the Wintoon Indians. There were some vigilantes in Weaverville that went up there, and when the men of the tribe were gone, these men from Weaverville came in and killed several women and children. There were a few children that did survive that massacre. With that being said, we believe it was Nellie's mother who survived that massacre. So that would make, both Nellie and Edith Wintu Indians. Now, with that said, we have a very good friend, and she is part Wintu Indian. And when we were kind of talking about my uncle, Henry, and we had mentioned the last name of McKay. And she had said, well, that's really interesting because I believe that we have, Wintu relatives with the last name of McKay. So now how weird would that be if it was that my great uncle murdered my friend's family? It's not really a laughing matter, but in a way it is, because it's just so strange how things kind of come together and make a full circle. So she's in the process of doing some investigation herself, and Robert's doing some more. And I think if we have an update, Robert will let everyone know, and we'll kind of go from there.
All right, cool. Thanks, Cheryl. Why don't we head down to the hospital and go check it out?
Sounds good.
So we've come down to our second chapter in this story, and we're sitting here over on Brezflower Lane in South Reading, and I am sitting in front of what is now the Social Service Office and Shasta County Health Department. And what this once was the second general hospital and the third general hospital in Shasta County. The first general hospital was in what is now Old Shasta, and that was in existence up until 1900, when the building behind me was built to be the second Shasta General Hospital. And this encompassed 90 acres of land, and I'll just kind of scan around here when I'm done talking and show you what the land looks like today. But it had a orchard and a farm, and it was pretty state of the art at the time from what I've read. A lot of new equipment that had been just invented, and what it was not just a hospital, but it was also a tuberculosis treatment center as well. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why it was 2.5-3 miles out of Reading. They kind of wanted to keep the people with tuberculosis out of the way, unfortunately. So the reason why we are here is because this is where they brought Edith and Nellie after the shooting. They brought them from Whiskeytown out to here, and unfortunately Nellie passed away 2 days later. The shooting happened on Wednesday, and she passed away on Friday night at 10 o'clock from her wounds. She was in shock the entire time, unfortunately, and they didn't think that she would survive. But a month later is when Edith passed away. She passed away on February 22nd from her wounds as well. But what was kind of interesting about her was in the coroner's inquest, it also says that she died from tuberculosis as well, as part of her reason of cause of death. I have not pulled the death certificates on either one of them because it's a little difficult here in Shasta County. They're not real keen on giving out information, and you have to pay, I believe, $25, $30 for a copy of the death certificate. So I haven't done that yet. Anyway, so where we are at is, from the information I found, I believe that both Edith and Nellie are buried here at the cemetery that is on this property. The General Hospital actually did have its own cemetery, and I believe that they're buried here. I've found no other records of where else they could be buried as of yet, and if I do, I will do a makeup video and let you know. But this hospital went from 1900 up until 1934. In 1934, the third General Hospital was built just about a block east of my current location, and it was also built on the 90 acres. And when that became a hospital, the building behind me became a what they call Ohm's Home, or a poorhouse, and that was for the poor and indigent people. And if you look at census records from 1940 and you look up people that were here, it will say Shasta County Poorhouse. And so that was in existence up until 1957. And then after that, it is now what you see, the Shasta Social Service Office. So this is the third General Hospital, built in 1934, and like I said, was in existence up until 1987, and is now part of the Shasta County Health Department. So this is the Shasta General Hospital Cemetery that was attached to the hospital. People were buried out here that couldn't afford a burial anywhere else, and a lot of people that died there at the hospital were buried out here. And this is where I believe Nellie and Edith are at. I've looked through mortuary records and other records, burial records, and everything seems to indicate that they are buried here. Unfortunately, this is surrounded by the Shasta Maintenance Department, and I can't get in there today just because they're not open. Otherwise, I kind of show you around the cemetery itself. But what I'm doing actually is I am going in here and cutting down the weeds and cutting down the shrub oaks and making it a little bit more presentable and a little bit nicer for the people who are buried here, a little respect. And if you look behind me, you will see there are some white wooden crosses. Those were put in by a gentleman named Mike Monahan, who was a high school teacher out at Enterprise High School and a great historian. He's also part of the Shasta Historical Society, but he brought it on himself to come out here and do this as well a few years ago and put these crosses in, which I thought was pretty cool. But the plots themselves, there's about 350 people buried here, and they have, each one of them has a round piece of concrete about that big to identify the grave. And I know of 2 headstones, and the rest of them are just metal mortuary plaques, and there's not a whole lot of them. I want to say maybe a handful or 2, and the rest are unfortunately all unknown. I do have a list of 95 people who are interned here, and I have put those 95 people on Find a Grave with any information I can find on them. And I'm still kind of digging up information, but I haven't found Edith or Nellie's information 100% that they're here, but I really do think that they are buried here. Like I said, all the evidence is pointing that direction. So, there is one other thing. There is a second General Hospital cemetery, and that is over on Clear Creek Road, but that wasn't put in until about 1948, 1949. Those are the oldest graves I've found in there, and there's only 36 people interned in the Clear Creek cemetery. And then other than that, this was the General Hospital cemetery. So I'm going to kind of do a little walk around with the camera, kind of show you the cemetery a little bit. So one thing I forgot to mention, the reason why the hospital was moved from Shasta over to Redding was the fact that the copper smelters at the time that basically annihilated the landscape here in Shasta County was doing a number on the people with tuberculosis. It wasn't clean, fresh air that they were breathing, it was toxic air. And that was one of the main reasons for moving the hospital to where it was down on Hospital Lane, or Breastflower, which is now called, was that they could breathe somewhat cleaner air down there than they could here in Shasta. Once again, because of the copper smelters and the damage that the fumes were doing to the environment and to the people living here. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of fun for me, and come join me on some more. Can't wait.